Yes, good evening. You had a query about the exam pattern, Mr. Sheikh Shadi. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, he's disconnected from the meeting. Okay, let's go ahead with the session. Once he joins, he can raise the query. Okay, I think he's joined. He's joined the meeting. Good evening,
Yes,
Mr.
madam.
Sheikh. Yes, yes. You had a query regarding the exam pattern.
Yes, madam.
Yes, please
As
go
this is
ahead.
first time writing,
Okay.
this is the first time writing the NPTEL exam, madam. I have doubt that the exam consists of multiple choice questions or including multiple choice questions, fill in the blanks, and essay questions are also will be there.
Okay, so you must have gotten an email just some time back, actually. Uh,
Yes, madam.
so each course has its own exam pattern. So one second, I'll share my screen. I'll show you where the announcement is. Is my screen visible?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to call me ma'am. But yeah, so you can see the at the announcements page, right? In your NPTEL homepage, just go to the announcements page and you can see the exam format April 2023 post. The email came just some time ago. You can check your email also. I think it came just 15 minutes ago, if I'm not wrong, 15-20 minutes ago. So you can see
Yes,
here
madam.
the type of exam will be available in the list. So I think it's, yeah, so you can see that it's a computer based exam. If that's the case, then it must be MCQs usually. However, I would still recommend that you post in the discussion forum. I've actually raised the question already regarding the hall ticket also. They've not responded right now. Uh, no, they've mentioned that hall tickets will be issued soon and things will be available in the hall ticket. But you can see here, the questions will be on the computer and answers will have to be, you can see here, right? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yes.
it's going to be a mix of all questions, if I'm not wrong. MCQs, fill in the blanks, essay type answers, etc. But nonetheless, I will ask them again. I'll ask them if there is a specific set of formats that are going to be given, and I'll post in the discussion forum, or I'll ask them to post in the discussion forum. Is that all right?
Okay, madam.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really confused about it, madam.
yeah, yeah.
Recently,
I understand
our
because.
mentor told that
Hmm,
totally it is a MCQ questions, but after reading the Gmail, it
okay,
has
okay,
given that there is a
okay.
fill in the blanks also and
Okay.
essay
Essay
type
type
questions
answers.
also will
Right,
also be
right, right.
here.
Okay, okay. I'll let them know. The thing is, it actually varies from subject to subject. If you notice, some of them even have offline exams, right? Paper and pen
Yes, ma'am.
exams also. So that's the reason why each course has a different format. Nonetheless, I'll put the query across to the main team and I'll get back to you. I'm making note of it right now. All right. Are there any other queries? If not, we'll start with the session. Okay. So give me a minute and we'll start. All right. Good evening, one and all present here. We are here for the 10th live session for the NPTEL course on environmental impact assessment. The course instructor is Dr. Harshit Lakra. She is an assistant professor at the Department of Architecture and Planning at the Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. We have two of these live interaction sessions. uh, handled by two different teaching assistants. Session one usually happens on Saturdays, although as I understand, your previous session has been postponed, right? So that's handled by Miss Isha Rato. She is a PMRF and research scholar at the Department of Architecture and Planning at IIT Roorkee. Session two, which is usually on Tuesdays, is handled by me. I'm Monica S. I'm a PMRF and research scholar at the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, IIT Kharagpur. This scheme, PMRF, is the Prime Minister's research fellowship. It's a merit-based fellowship that is given to select PhD scholars from the IITs, IISc, and a few other colleges. According to the PMRF scheme, the PhD students are expected to teach uh, outside their colleges, and NPTEL and PMRF have sort of tied up and given us this opportunity where we can teach and fulfill the requirements for the external teaching component. This is part of that. So, as usual, we have two major um, media of interaction for this course. One is the doubts and interaction sessions during the weekly live sessions, which is ours happens every Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. You can always, after a question or a set of few questions, I would always prompt you to ask if you have any queries. But even otherwise, if you have any query during the course of the session, you can always raise your hand on Google Meet. There is an option to raise your hand, and then once I request you to unmute, you can unmute and raise your query. Questions can also be posted in the chat box as and when you feel like you have a query. Don't worry about the questions being trivial or like them being not too major. They could even be minor queries, and we can have a discussion on them. Right? And we also have the discussion forum for the course. Any questions related to the live sessions conducted can be raised there, and we'll address it. But even otherwise, you can raise questions in general regarding the subject, right? So those will be handled by the main team usually. However, I see that not many people are attending the discussion, these discussions, the weekly discussions. Therefore, what we'll be doing is, I think I will go ahead and, this is still in negotiation. I'll probably go ahead and post the links to where the queries answers are, right? So, however, whatever queries have been asked in the discussion forum, like usually the queries are resolved here. If you check the videos out, you'll get the answers, right? So, a brief outline of the live session. We will have a short recap of what was taught in week 10. We'll just go through the titles and the coverage of each lecture. Then we'll look at week 10 assignment questions from the previous round of the course. We'll have a few discussions and explanations to support the answers as to why these answers are being given. After that, we'll have week 10 assignment questions from the current run of the course. We'll have the answers discussed and explained. We'll also see what the corresponding queries from the discussion forum will also be addressed. So wherever on the right top, you'll see a discussion forum query, red color lettering. That means somebody has raised an issue about the question in the discussion forum. Right? I've tried to address as much as possible. In case I'm missing out on something or some query that has been raised has been missed out here, you can always raise it here. Right? Yeah. Is there a query? Otherwise, kindly mute yourself. Okay. So, looking at the week's course contents, we had yet another week of methods, EIA methods, right? So, we had 5 lectures on the same. Continuing with the trend, we looked at EIA methods corresponding to landscape and visuals in lecture 46. 47 dealt with cultural heritage, 48 with health, 49 and 50 dealt with socioeconomic impacts, parts 1 and 2. Right, so Lecture 46 on landscape visuals, EIA methods. We saw a few concepts, then scoping and baseline studies, impact prediction and evaluation, that is assessing landscape effects, assessing visual effects, showing visual effects, cumulative assessment and daylight sunlight effect. So lecture 47 dealt with cultural heritage. We saw how the perspective towards EIA in cultural heritage changed over time. We saw the purpose of such an assessment, then definition and concept, baseline study, and impact prediction and evaluation. Lecture 48 dealt with EIA methods on health. So we saw the beginning of human health risk assessment, definitions and concepts, overlap and integration among the economic and social impact assessment disciplines. So health will sort of come under ESIA, right? So concept of inside the fence versus outside the fence, screening and scoping for health impact assessment, assessment for health impact assessment, mitigation or enhancement and monitoring for HIA, and human health risk assessment as to how you do it. Lecture 49 dealt with socioeconomic impacts, part 1. So the reason why we saw socioeconomic impacts separately in a couple of lectures is because the mainstream methodologies, the mainstream uh, concepts, the fundamentals differ slightly for socioeconomic impacts. Physical impacts and biophysical impacts are usually the focus of EIA. However, it's extremely essential that we take the socioeconomic impacts also into consideration. That is the human component, right? It's not just about objective things, it's about the subjective experiences. It's about all these nuances of human society and civilization which get affected during a development which should also be spoken about, right? Initially the focus was not there at all. Slowly the focus is including these things as well. That's why we have two separate lectures on these. So lecture 49 sort of introduced definition and concept of social impact assessment. We saw a basic outline of scoping, baseline studies, impact prediction and evaluation, both direct and indirect employment impacts, and assessing the significance. In lecture 50 was part 2 of socioeconomic impacts. So we saw scoping and baseline studies, that is scoping social issues as for economic impact, population, dealing with population as to how do you approach it, demographic impact, housing stock, local services and social cohesion. Impact prediction and evaluation included population changes and its significance, accommodation requirements and its significance, demand for local services and its significance, other social impacts including cohesion, displacement and resettlement. We also saw mitigation and enhancement, an overview of the measures, community benefits agreements, and social impact management plans, that is SIMS. Right? So we'll go through the previous round week 10 assignment questions right now. Before we go into it, are there any queries regarding the taught content or any of the questions? Whatever was already raised in the discussion forum regarding questions 9 and 11 have been already addressed in the lecture. We'll see them soon. Are there any other queries? All right. Yeah.
No, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Thank you for the response. We'll do something. We'll follow our usual procedure. What we'll do is, after I show a question, kindly respond in the chat box, right? It doesn't matter if you're responding wrong. Just apply your mind to the question. Think about what the answer could be or what you think the answer is, and then we can also figure out, what was the reason for a gap. Also, like wrong answers also heavily help. Sometimes we assume that the answer we know, like we know the answers, it feels very familiar, but we might end up doing blunders, right? So kindly respond and then we'll look at the answers and explanations, right? Okay. Question number 1 for the session. State true or false. The European Landscape Convention defines landscape as a zone or area as perceived by local people or visitors, whose visual features and character are the result of the action of natural and or cultural, that is human factors. Is this true or false? So we are basically looking at the definition that was given by the European Landscape Convention. Excuse me. And how do they define landscape? Any responses? Okay, let's just go into the slide. So this particular definition is from this slide in the lecture. The definition of a landscape by the European Landscape Convention, which happened in 2000, right, in Florence, Italy. It is a zone or area as perceived by local people or visitors whose visual features and character are the result of the action of natural and or cultural factors, right? So this is in fact the definition. So the answer is true. But we've seen that several of these definitions keep coming up. We've seen that a lot of these conventions focused a lot on these definitions, right? What would be the reason? Is somebody unmuted? Is there a query? Kindly mute yourself. Thank you. So, yeah, there is a reason why definitions are usually the focus of such um, conventions, or that's sort of the starting point usually. The reason is what happens is once these definitions are, or the scope of conservation or some sort of assessment or some initiative is defined, automatically the relevant concepts start developing. For example, in this current scenario, the European Landscape Convention in 2008 sort of expanded the definition, right? So it became a multi-scalar landscape approach. So they defined an approach to planning and design. So they sort of deliberated on it. And over time, the concept of landscape resilience evolved. So once this concept evolves, we start focusing on what are the approaches to dealing with this, right? We look at community-based approaches, how they evolve, what are the strategic and regulatory perspectives that are related to, such approaches. So things start moving in some direction. That's the reason why such definitions sort of become fundamental, right? And they'll also dictate what your approach is going to be, right? So here, landscape as a zone or area is perceived by local people or visitors. So both the visitors and local people become important, right? So the local people might take it for granted, but the visitors might think, no, no, this is something of high value. Or say the local people place a lot of importance, but it might not be, essential for or of something of importance for outsiders, right? But nonetheless, either or, an area which is perceived as a landscape or a particular entity, right? That's what we will consider as landscape. I hope that's clear. Moving on to the next question. State true or false. The term zone of theoretical visibility, ZTV, is used to describe the area over which a development can theoretically be seen, and usually computer generated using a digital terrain model, DTM, or digital surface model, DSM. Is this true or false? Any responses? Okay, we have one response. Any others? Okay. We have two responses, and both of you are absolutely right. This is ZTV. So, if you remember from the slides, the term zone of theoretical visibility is used to describe the area over which a development can theoretically be seen. So, we use either DTM or DSM for this. Digital terrain model and digital surface model are just slightly different things. DTM terrain model usually consists of the terrain, the earth surface, right? We don't include buildings or trees or such. So we look at the topography of the land itself. However, a digital surface model it has all these surface heights, including trees and buildings. Right? That's the only difference. The ZTV or a zone of theoretical visibility is also sometimes known as zone of visual influence or a visual envelope map. So these three terms you will have to remember. These are technical terms. We are not like loosely calling them so because they are wherever it is visible or wherever it's influencing. No, these have become jargon or technical terms in the field, and these are you cannot really change them, right? So the answer is true. Both of you are right. So let's take a look at a few examples, right? So this is these are all the following examples are by this firm Landscape Consultancy Limited. All right, so they're not from India; they're based abroad. So I found their sheets very enlightening. So I've included a few of their sheets. So this is a consultancy that they've done. So in this map, the pink area is so this one is for a wind hill farm, right? A hill farm is like a windmill, all right. So there is a hub under tip. Okay, so there is a hub on which the turbine stands, and then there is a tip, right? So the tip sort of denotes the topper, like upper parts, and the hub sort of denotes the lower parts. In this image, the pink areas is where you can see the both the hub and the tip, right? And the light blue areas is where you can see the tip alone. All right, so you can see these radiuses that they've drawn from the site, right? So if you install this project somewhere here, you can actually see the windmill up to this point, right? It's you can actually see it if you're coming through. However, this is based on a DTM, bare earth model is what they call it, right? So you've not included all the obstructions. If you include all the obstructions, this will be the map. So there are several obstructions on the ways, which means you won't be able to see them everywhere. Okay? So this will be the map. This is where you will see the windmill. The windmill will be visible from. So taking a look at another such set of maps. This one is for a housing development, right? So this is where the development is located. This point, the X marks the spot. The thing is, originally housing without all the obstructions, just the bare earth model, which is the digital terrain model, right? The housing will be visible from such a big area. However, if you include obstructions on the way, all of those things, then the housing development will be visible only from these patches. So there are already existing buildings that will sort of, obstruct the view. It's not going to be because of this housing development that the visual is going to be modified. It's not a fresh modification. Right? This is another example. This one is for a railway line. Right? So it's an entire length of railway line. It's a terrain map, and here from the terrain map, so they've created this sort of a heat map, is what they're calling it, right? So where will it be visible, and to different levels of visibility. So again, the top one is without obstruction, and the bottom one is with obstruction, right? Uh, how do they do this? Because it's a huge stretch, they actually do it in bits and pieces, and then they overlap it. You can see each of these rectangles are done separately. The assessment is done separately, and a detailed view is given, right? So this is for the entire project. So they have several sheets, sort of giving where will the the railway line be visible. So this one is with obstruction. This will be the more realistic view. What happens is usually during such delineation, there'll be several rounds of assessment. First, they'll just sit at the desk. You'll probably look at the terrain map. You'll determine where it is going to be visible from, and then you'll do on-field surveys. You'll do detailed mapping from secondary sources initially, and then like on-field surveys and primary sources later, and then you model it, and then you can figure out the refined version. So the zone of theoretical visibility can also be a 3D map actually. So for example, for this proposed house, where all is it going to be visible from, right? So this is a map showing where all the house is going to be visible from, right? This link actually gives you several other examples. You can see them here, right? You can take a look at them. Some of them are very interesting. For example, this one is a sort of this development near a water body, and they have three options. So this is the existing hotel, and then you have two other proposals. One is for a 7-story building, and the other is for a 10-story building. So, sorry. What happens is you do several assessments. So this is for the existing one, right? So this is for the 7-story proposal. You can see because it's at the tip of this, land extent. You can actually see from a very big distance. This is for the 10-story building. You can see how the field of vision increases, right? So yeah, you have several of these examples just to give you an idea. I hope that's more clear now, right? So even in the discussion forum later, somebody has mentioned about this zone of theoretical visibility. So this further explanation can also be added there. Right? I hope that clears the query as well. Okay, moving on to the next question. Yeah. A measure of the physical state of the landscape, which may include the extent to which typical character is represented in individual areas, the intactness of the landscape, and the condition of individual elements is called dash. So we are looking at a measure of the physical state of the landscape. So is it A, landscape character, B, landscape quality, C, landscape value, or D, visual analysis? Any answers? Okay, we have one answer. Anybody else? So we have a couple of different answers. So let's see what the answer is. Right? So landscape quality is what we are looking at actually. So the answer is B. So I think someone had answered B, right? You're right, sir. So, a measure of the physical state of the landscape. I know it's mildly counterintuitive because quality is something that we don't really, it's like goodness aspect. It's not that one. It's more about the physical state of the landscape, right? So that's the answer. The answer is B. So what are the other options that have been given? Landscape character is a distinct, recognizable, and consistent pattern of elements in the landscape that makes one landscape different from another rather than better or worse. So there is some aspect of the landscape that will give its unique character, right? Like some sort of identity. There should be some reason why it stands out to us, that it's perceivable for us as a landscape, right? So that distinct, recognizable, and consistent pattern of elements in the landscape is what we call landscape character, right? And then landscape value is the relative value that is attached to different landscape by society. So this is the ascribed value, right? This is not the inherent value. It's not a use value. We value certain landscapes more than others. Maybe because of its natural beauty, maybe because of cultural reasons, religious reasons. It could be anything, or sentimental reasons even. I remember reading about this one paper by Walter Fiery. So Fiery is somebody who proposed sentiment as an important variable in a city. So most cities usually talk about how urban settlement is dictated by land value, right? Especially Western cities, the newer post-industrial cities is what we call them. The recent cities, uh, after industrialization, most of them sort of have this economic or a functional basis for settlement is what people usually propose. It's like if you can afford a place in a particular part of the city, you live there. However, Fiery is somebody who mentioned that sentiment makes a huge difference. That's very understandable, especially in the Indian context. Say, you take an old city or a temple city, the old core area, no matter how bad the living condition is, people are very reluctant to move out of there because of sentiments attached, because of a very status based value attached to it, right? So this is that kind of value, the relative value. So in fact, there is, I think, if I'm not wrong, there is a pentagonal park in Boston that Fiery talks about. If that park is removed, that entire area's traffic will be handled. It will be completely decongested. Things will become extremely easy, but people are not willing to let go of that park. That park is some 100 years old, and they have such huge sentimental values to it that it has formed a pentagon in that area, and everybody has to move around it, right? Like you cannot bypass it, you cannot construct over it. People are not willing to let that happen. So that's the kind of relative value that you attach to landscape, right? Landscape qualities, the physical state of the landscape, as we just saw. The next one is visual amenity. So visual amenity is overall pleasantness of the views. So this pleasantness aspect is what visual amenity is. People enjoy of their surroundings, which provides an attractive visual setting or backdrop for the enjoyment of activities of the people living, working, recreating, visiting, or traveling through an area. So this is like a probably this is why people attach value to it. But sometimes even without visual amenity, people might attach value to it. Right? Even if it is an eyesore, which usually things are not, especially cultural monuments. But even if it, sort of stands out as a sore spot, if people have sentimental value or people have determined that it's an important landscape, they attach value to it. But visual amenity might be one of the reasons why they attach value to it, right? So these are all words that have distinct meanings, but they're all interconnected and so close to each other. So you will have to remember the definitions, right? It's better to remember these keywords to help you through. All right. Before we move on to the next question, there's a query in the chat box. Can you please discuss the exam pattern of the company? Yes, we'll take a look at it. Although I think I've responded to it already. I had mentioned it in the beginning of the session as well. You must have gotten an email, right? That it could include MCQs, fill in the blanks, essay questions, and all. I'll explain it later. The thing is, we are not sure. Only the main team will know. I'll put across a query to them and I'll ask them to post about it, or I'll post it in the discussion forum once they respond. I hope that's all right. We'll have a detailed discussion regarding this later also, right? Moving on to the next question. So, question number 4. Identify the following factors that contribute to the landscape. So, we have 4 factors. We have geology, land ownership, smells, and memories. So, which of these contribute to the landscape? So, which factors? 1 and 2 only, 1 and 3 only, 2 and 3 only, or 1, 2, 3, and 4? Okay, we have a couple of answers. Alright, let's see what the answer is. So we have three sets of factors that contribute to the landscape. Okay? One is natural factors. We have geology, landform, hydrology, air and climate, soils, land cover or flora and fauna. So we have geology here, right? The second set of factors is cultural or social factors. So we have land use, settlement, enclosure, land ownership, time, depth. So we have land ownership here, right? And then the third set of factors is perceptual and aesthetic factors. So we have sight, that is color, texture, pattern, and form. Sounds, smells. So we have smells, touch or feel, preferences, associations, and memories. Right? Memories is the fourth one. So all the above are actually factors that contribute to the landscape. So these two are different factors. This is a different factor. This is a different type of factor. But at the end of the day, all of these are factors that contribute to the landscape. Right? So one of you is right. I hope that explanation stands. So that's a direct answer. Moving on to the next question. Match the following terms of Group A with a description in Group B. So we'll actually look at some of these in detail later also. So Group A we have test pitting, earthwork surveys, fines, and machine trenching. Any answers? Okay, so we have a couple of different answers. Let's see what each one is. Okay, the first option in Group E is it can be used for archaeological sites that are visible, such as banks, ditches, burial mounds, and sites of deserted or shrunken settlements. So this one is actually earthwork surveys, right? So these are usually used for visible areas, right? So that's sort of the keyword here. The second one is it involves the hand excavation of an array of small pits of a predetermined size and provides a clear picture of the nature of the soil structure and the upper layers of the underlying geology. So this is the case with test pitting, right? Finds are usually recovered artifacts. Recovered active artifacts as in from either test pitting, earthworks, like some sort of archaeological site or some excavation. From there you find these small artifacts, small things that were used in previous times. So those are finds, right? So uh, em- the third option, it employs trenches usually cut with a toothless ditching bucket laid out in a pattern across the site. The thing is, I know this is not directly given in the slides, but both by logic of exclusion and in general, this is the procedure for machine fencing, right? So they lay out in a pattern across the site. So usually this is done when you know that the artifacts are below a certain depth, right? So they end up digging trenches. I'll show you a picture of it later also, right? So these are the slides that deal with these hand excavation. So yeah, so P2, Q1, R4 and S3. The answer is C. Both of you are correct, right? So these are the slides that deal with these field survey techniques. You can see these are artifacts, right? So the answer is C. Let's take a look at some of these in slightly more detail so that you can, retain the thing. So in test pitting, what you do is you usually form a small, you know, you mark out an area for a pit. It's a small area, like say 1 by 1 meter. So then what you do is you start removing, the layers of soil from that. Then first say there is grass, the grass is removed, and then the sand is sort of sieved through to, figure out what kind of sand it is, what size of the particles are there, and in case there is something in the sand that you've taken out accidentally, it will end up in the sieve, right? So this is called the sieve, right? So in this sieve, in case you've dug out some artifact or something, in case that will also end up being here, and you can find out the proportion, the type of soil that is there, right? And you sort of make entries as to what is the quality, what is the character of the soil. Then what you do is you keep digging, so till a point where the soil character sort of changes. All right. So then after that you have to do this sieving process again. This process again you repeat it. You keep profiling the soil till you find something of relevance or something that you're looking for, or a predetermined distance. You can't do this for very big depth, right? You can do it for a certain depth, for shallow depths. So this test pitting can be done to check, sort of make a test checking, and you can do several of these pits across the site to figure out what is the layers of soil profile that is there, or what's buried underneath the soil. Okay. So this is an example of an earthwork survey. So this is Hadley Castle at Essex. So this is a castle that has been, lost. You can see that it's just ruins right now, right? So what happens in such places is they don't excavate. They actually do a survey of this entire mound, like a very detailed drawing as to what all is there, and then like this. So this is a very detailed drawing, and then the document talks about what is A, what is B, what is C. So this is a curtain wall, this is a tower, this is a broken wall. So this is a mound. What kind of cover is there? So they do this very very detailed survey of the entire area. Now that's an earthwork survey, right? So it's usually done for visible things. There's not much excavation needed. It's mostly about what is present, what is visible, what is above the surface. There might be other techniques that we employ to figure out what's beneath the surface, but that's a different technique. Right? Then we have mesh and fencing. So here you can see how they've sort of divided this area into plots. You can see they've already excavated this much, right? This has been done through mesh and fencing. So what happens is, because nothing is there till this layer, you might find something below this layer, right? These are very recent finds, right? You can see this. This is the mound where they put the soil, right? You can see this depth. They can use a machine to go to this depth. Where if you're very sure that nothing is present, in this layer, then you can just mesh and trench it. Mesh and trench is using a big JCB or something, and then clearing off the mud, the top layer. Right. So that's fines are straightforward, right? So I'm not included anything specific for that. All right. Moving on to the next question. As identified by ICOMOS 2011, potential sources of impacts to cultural heritage includes the following. So we have four aspects: large scale development, land use policy changes, large scale urban frameworks, and excessive or inappropriate tourism. So we are looking at potential sources of impacts to cultural heritage. Right? So is it A 1, 2, and 3 only? B 2 and 3 only? C 1, 2, and 4? Or D 1, 2, 3, and 4? Okay, we have one answer. Anybody else? Okay, we have a couple of answers, and both of you are absolutely right. So these are considered potential sources of impact by commerce, right? So large-scale developments, including all these roads, bridges, tall buildings, etc. Land use policy changes, large-scale urban frameworks, and excessive or inappropriate tourism. So the answer is D. Any queries till now? All right. Moving on to the next question. State true or false. Health impact assessment (HIA) looks at the potential effects of a project outside the fence, that is, on populations who live, work, or play in communities near to and potentially affected by the project. Is it true or false? So we are looking at health impact assessment and potential effects of a project outside the fence. Okay, we have a couple of varying answers. So let's see what the answer is. HIA actually includes both inside the fence and outside the fence. So whenever you have a project development, say a township development or something, inside the fence is, if this is the entire development and this is the city around it, right, or city near it. Usually it's not like this. Probably this is the city near it, right? So this is inside the fence, and this is the settlement nearby, right? HIA looks at both impacts because say you have some sort of factory or something within the settlement and they have emissions coming out. This is the easiest example, right? So these emissions might actually affect the city, right? So this is an issue. So we cannot just say, okay, this is my township, this is my development, I'm going to do my assessment only here. No, outside the fence is also included. So one of you is correct. So the answer is true. I hope that's clear. All right, moving on to the next question. State true or false. A human health risk assessment (HHRA) is a process to estimate the nature and probability of adverse health effects in humans who may be exposed to chemicals and contaminated environmental media now or in the future. So we are looking at a definition of human health risk assessment. Okay. There are a couple of answers and both of you are right. So this is in fact uh, the definition that is given by Environmental Protection Agency. Right? So it is a process to estimate the nature and probability, both of them, of adverse health effects in humans, right? So the answer is true. So moving on to the next question. Identify the steps of human health risk assessment (HHRA) from the following. So which of these are present? Right. One is hazard identification. Second is dose response assessment. Third is exposure assessment, and fourth is risk characterization. Okay, we have a couple of responses, and both of you are correct. All four of them are present in HHRA. In fact, they are mentioned in sequence in this question, right? So first step is hazard identification, then we look at dose response assessment, and then we figure out exposure assessment, and then risk characterization. The answer is D. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Select the preferred order of addressing potential impacts in EIA as stated by mitigation hierarchy. This is an important concept that you'll have to remember. This has been mentioned in one of the previous weeks as well. Actually, probably more than 1 week. Okay. So we have four options. Uh, Option one is minimize the impact, avoid the impact, repair the adverse consequences of impact, and then compensate people for impacts that cannot be avoided or mitigated. So these are the keywords: minimize, avoid, repair, and compensate. Or do we avoid the impact and repair the adverse consequences, minimize the impact, and then compensate? Do we avoid the impact, minimize the impact, repair the adverse consequences of the impact, and compensate people? Or avoid, minimize, compensate, and then repair? Okay, we have one answers. Anybody else? Okay, we have a couple of varied answers. Let's see what the answer is. So the answer is actually C. First, we try to avoid, then we try to minimize as much as possible the impact. Then what we do is we repair whatever impact has been done. We repair and then we compensate. Right? Yes, yes, both of you are correct. So this is the mitigation hierarchy. So the mitigation hierarchy is the words might be slightly different in each sense, right? So this is from the biodiversity aspect. So what happens is the words might be slightly different in different contexts, but this is the general idea. So step one is avoidance, but after avoidance, what do? We minimize, we restore. So here the word restore has been given. What, like, it could also mean repair, right? Then this entire part offset contribution. So here we are looking at offset essentially for compensation. But if there is some positive contribution, say, does something good for the society, so beyond that point, it becomes a positive value. Right? This is the mitigation hierarchy. This is something that we need to remember. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Yeah. State true or false. According to the Interorganizational Committee on Guidelines and Principles for Social Impact Assessment, Socioeconomic Impact Assessment (SIA) is the consequences to human populations of any public or private actions that alter the ways in which people live, work, play, relate to one another, organize to meet their needs, and generally cope as members of the society. Is it true or false? We have a couple of answers, and both of you are right. This is true. This is, in fact, the definition that has been given by the Organizational Committee on Guidelines and Principles for Social Impact Assessment. Okay, so this is true. All right. So, yeah, let's look at one more question before we go for a break. Question number 13. Key social differences provided by World Bank 1991, which are significant from EIA perspective, includes the following. So, one, communities, that is diverse group of people, ethnic or tribal groups, occupational groups, and socio-economic groups. Option A is 1, 2, and 4. Option B is 2, 3, and 4 only. Option C is 1, 3, and 4 only. Or D is 1, 2, 3, and 3. We have a couple of responses. So both of you are correct. In fact, the other group that is sort of not given here is age and particular age and gender groups, right? Like for example, women, older people, etc. So the answer is D. All right. So before we move on to the next question, let's take a short break. I think, yeah. So it's 7 o'clock right now. Let's meet around 7:05. Okay? I hope that's all right with everybody. Yeah, we'll resume the session now. Kindly mute yourself and yeah, thank you. I hope my screen is visible. All right. So moving on to the next question. Prediction of socio-economic impacts includes the following approaches. So, A. Extrapolative methods. B. Normative methods. C. Cause-effect relationships between the variables involved. D. All of the above. Any responses? Okay. We have a couple of answers and both of you are correct. So here, when we say extrapolative methods, these methods usually what they do is say there is some sort of data that we have and say this is the trend, right? So what happens is this is the current present time. Right? So we sort of extrapolate this saying, okay, this is the general trend in which things are moving, which means in 20 years, this is where it will be. So we sort of extrapolate the current scenario or the scenario from the past. Those are called extrapolator methods, right? How we do this extrapolation is, we could have regression or something simple as, linear extrapolation. We have geometric methods. We have linear regression methods. We have several methods that are there. This is very normal amongst population projection, for example. Right? The second one is normative methods. Normative methods are sort of dependent on our definition of what should be, right? Like what does it have to be, and is it meeting that baseline? It's some sort of you determine what it should be. It's not a description. It's more like you determine what the norm is, right? So that's the normal meaning of normative as well. So these methods are also there. And we could also look at cause effect relationships, right? We can have several variables and then we could, excuse me, just give me one minute. I'll be back. Sorry about the interruption. Yeah. So, like I was saying, these are the three sets of approaches that we can use to predict the socioeconomic impacts. Okay. Moving on to the next question. For measuring wider economic impacts, that is multiplier approach, following methods are used. A. Economic base multiplier model. B. Input output model. C. Keynesian multiplier. And D. All of the above. Any responses? Okay. We have one answer. Anybody else? All right. So we have a couple of answers and both of you are right. The answer is B. So whenever we are looking at wider economic impacts, we look at the multiplier approach could have three methods under them, right? We usually use these three methods. There are several other methods as well. So the economic based multiplier is when you have a region and you sort of determine that if this region develops, or rather if this development comes in place, the entire region will, generate so much, as in, like twice or thrice or 1.8 times. Some sort of value is determined through, modeling, and that's the economic base multiplier model, right? So it's usually a very simple model, right? Flow, the other one, the input output model, what happens is we model the flows, whatever happens, where, like, we have a detailed idea or a detailed scenario building, more like, of what all will come in, what all will go out, what are the impacts. Say we build an industry in some area, right? So the prediction is that, okay, what kind of industry is it? Is it going to be populated by the local population, which means there will not be a big impact on the population itself, right? But say 50%, we are expecting that someone else from, somewhere else will come in. Then where do they come in from? Are they coming in from within the state, from a nearby state, from nearby cities, or are they coming from some other state far away? Right? So then, if they're coming from a faraway state, they might not come and settle down per se. They might look forward to going back, which means the kind of households that will be populating that area will be, single member households. Will be just the male, usually the male working in an industry. In the case of an industry, say, or say if it is somebody from within the state, say an advanced or a, metropolitan city, and there might be people coming in from villages. There is a certain tendency for these people to settle down in the city because they find it more economical and, lifestyle wise also more beneficial to settle down in the city. And if they see an opportunity and they can afford to settle down in the city, they look forward to settling down in the city, right? However, if it's someone who's already in the city, they wouldn't mind traveling across the city even because they already live in a particular community, they're established somewhere, they have a family somewhere. They wouldn't really think of, shifting their house within the city. There might be people who shift also, but there will be people who won't shift also. So we sort of model all these input output. So for each variable we'll model, we'll look at, population, we'll look at employment, we'll look at the local services that will come up. Will be a detailed model like that, right? The next one is a Keynesian multiplier. So this is, sort of named after Maynard Keynes. So he is a very major economist that we've had. So his theorization is that a money injection into an economic system, whether national or regional, will cause an increase in the level of income in that system by some multiple of the original injection. So his aspect is, it's not just about, okay, you do a development and then somewhere else or some other region or some. No, whenever a certain amount of money is invested, it will automatically, lead to a multiplier. So there is an overlap between the Keynesian multiplier and the economic based multiplier. These are slightly different models, right? So all these are usually used for measuring wider economic impacts. So what is the impact going to be of any kind of development? This is one. These are multiplier approaches that we employ. I hope that's clear. Moving on to the next question. Structure of the global multi-poverty index includes three following dimensions. So we have four listed: education, health, standard of living, and social inequality. So is it 1, 2, and 3, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 3, and 4, or 1, 2, and 4? Any answers? Okay, we have one answer. Anybody else? We have a couple of answers, and both of you are right. So these are the, three dimensions: education, health, and standard of living. That is part of this global multi-poverty index, right? We have 10 indicators that are constituent, right? So we'll look a little bit more about this later in the session today, not right now. So the answer is A. Right. Moving on to the next question. State true or false. Gravity model approach is that the number of employees moving into a particular settlement would be a positive function of that settlement's size and a negative function of its distance from the project site. We are looking at gravity model approach. Is it true or false? We have a couple of answers, and both of you are right. The answer is true. All three of you are right. The answer is true. So this, we have several models. If you've been through any sort of, I mean, from personal experience, architecture or planning education, these are models that we usually come across. We, if you remember the centrality model of a city, and then there are migration models that we study about. So this is one of the migration models. Like there are step models, so step migration model, chain migration model. So this particular gravity model is a very popular one. So what it basically says is, if there is a city, right, the number of employees who are moving in will be a positive function of the settlement size. So if it is a bigger city, more employees will come because the city usually will end up being more advanced in terms of the functions that it provides, the variety of functions that it provides. So if a small city has some employment, some people will come. But if a major city provides the same kind of industry, even more people will move in, right? So the migration potential of a bigger in-migration potential of a bigger city is much higher, right? Because people want to sort of settle down in as big a city as possible. So that's the general. Of course, it's everything has its exceptions, especially these theories. But that's one aspect. The other aspect is negative function of its distance from the project site. So if say this city is a major city, right? The thing is, if there is another smaller city here, this city will get the maximum amount of employees. There might be people moving in here as well. There is sort of some inductive effect, so to say, yeah, on the nearby cities as well. And say there is a city that's far away, right? And this person is coming from, say, place D, right? Sorry, this is D, not B. So based on the employment that is created in A, if they can, they will absolutely try to settle in A. But what if they cannot afford to settle in this, right? And say the factory is situated somewhere here, this red dot. What they will do is they will, if not A, they will try to settle down in B because this is a city as well and they can travel, right? So as the city sort of moves farther away, this, for example, C, they will not go to it. So it's negatively related to the distance from the projects, right? So it need not be even the city, even within a city, if this is the project site, people will want to settle down as close to the project site as possible than here, right? If you're going to settle down anyway, might as well, right? So this is it's just a direct translation of the Newton's formula, right? So that's true. Moving on to the next question. Match the following terms of group A with their description given in group B. So we have social cohesion and local services. We have two descriptions. Any answers? Anybody else? All right, let's look at the answers. We have a couple of responses. Right? So the first aspect is immigrant employees and their families place demand on a wide range of services, including education, health, recreation, police, fire, and social services. So this actually talks about the local services that are available by immigrant employees, right? And the second one, it refers to people's sense of belonging to a community, their satisfaction with life in the community, and whether or not the community is considered a social asset. So it talks about whether people consider, you know, whether they feel attached to the community that they're living in, right? And to each other essentially. So that's social cohesion. So the answer is B. Yes. Yes. Whoever has answered B is correct. Right? So this is sort of a definition of social cohesion that we saw. And this is the slide where ma'am actually describes the local services. Right? It's not directly from the slide. So the answer is B. Okay, moving on to the next question. State true or false. Economic displacement refers to situations where people's houses are not directly affected, but where there is a loss of other assets or access to assets that will result in a disruption of livelihoods and associated loss of income. Is it true or false? Okay, we have a couple of answers. Anybody else? All right, all of you are correct. So there are two types of displacement. Physical displacement is when your house is destroyed and you're, sort of forced to move from wherever you are staying right now. But economic displacement is when you are not moving, but say the place that you are working in is destroyed, right? Say they shut down a factory, like something as simple as that, to say an entire precinct or an area is demolished, and say you're somebody who's an informal worker who works in the service industry there, you will end up losing your livelihood. Right? Or there is some asset in an area that is adding value to your, uh, you know, um, your house. Say you're gaining rent from that house because of that particular location or something, and that locational aspect or that value is gone, right? Whatever gave it value is gone. Then you're losing out in some way or the other. So that's economic displacement. It need not be somebody moving, right? Okay. Before we move on to the next question, so this is true, right? So yes, sir, we'll be discussing. So there is a request to explain assignment 10 number 11 question, right? Yeah, yeah, we'll be looking at it right now. All right, because you've answered week 10 assignments, we'll quickly go through all the answers and I'll give any additional explanations or, clarifications wherever the queries have been, right? Some of them have wrong answers. You are right that some of the questions, some of the answer keys are wrong. Those will also be explained. The modification on the site will be made later. They are in the process of making them. But apart from that, are there any queries in whatever we've seen till now? All right. So let's move on to the current week assignments, right? So this there is a query in the discussion forum regarding this as well. So I've addressed it here. State true or false. As per European Landscape Convention, the landscape includes rural areas, urban townscapes, and marine scapes. So the answer is given as true, but this person claims that the answer is false. Why? Their claim is that this is the definition of the European Landscape Convention, right? The thing is, apart from this, ma'am also mentions that, so this is not the only sentence that the European Landscape Convention that is given about. Yes, this is the definition, most definitely. But They are talking about what all are included in general in landscape. This is not necessarily a definition, but ma'am actually mentions this while she's going through the slides, right? That it includes rural, urban townscape, rural areas, urban townscapes, and marine seascapes. So the answer is true. I hope that clarifies the query from the discussion forum, right? The second question, match the terms in given in group A with group B. So we have natural factors of landscape, perceptual and aesthetic factors of landscape, cultural and social factors of landscape. Okay, by the way, for the previous questions, both of you are correct. Your answer is right? So, yeah. So these are, again, if you remember, we saw the factors influencing landscape, right? So we have three sets of factors: natural, perceptual and aesthetic, cultural or social. Okay, we have a few answers. Sorry, I forgot to mention the question number. Yeah. So here, land ownership and settlement will be cultural or social aspects. Air, climate, and hydrology and land cover will be natural factors. And perceptual and aesthetic factors will be these touch, feel, preferences, associations, and memories. Right? We saw this at the beginning of the session as well. So it will be P2, Q3, and R1. So these are the slides. Yes, all of you are correct. So we want to question number 3. Match the terms given in Group A with Group B based on the corporate report on national character area profiles. We have 4 terms: coherence, stewardship, disturbance, and historicity. Okay. So these are all spoken about when, ma'am spoke about these criteria for capturing visual character, right? Complexity, coherence, disturbance, stewardship, imageability, visual scale, and naturalness, right? So the answer is actually A, right? So coherent level of management for vegetation. So this is talking about management. So that will be stewardship. Stewardship is when so if somebody is given stewardship of a particular area, it means they are responsible for its management. So that's the meaning of stewardship, right? So the spatial arrangement of vegetation will come under coherence. Vegetation with continuity. So this continuity is historicity, right? So there is temporal continuity. That is also an important aspect. And then we have disturbance, which is the visual impact of disturbance. Okay, so okay, the answer is A. There is a query again in the chat box. Can we discuss the exam pattern and guidelines in depth in the next session? I'll do something. I will send a mail to the core team. I will gather details about the examination pattern. I will ask them because the mail that has been sent mentions that all the question patterns are available: MCQs, fill in the blanks, essay type, right? I am not sure myself about the examination pattern. I will get it clarified. I will post it as soon as the clarification comes in the discussion forum. But I will also mention at the beginning of next session about the exam pattern and guidelines. Yes, we can do that. If there is anything specific, general guidelines I will give. But if there is anything specific you want to know, please raise the query here or in the discussion forum. I'll promise to get back to you. You can actually mention that you've discussed this in the live session, right? Previous year's questions, I will have to ask them. Again, I am not sure if this is something that NPTEL does, right? So I will again put across a request saying there were queries regarding this. If they do share, I will definitely share it in the discussion forum, and in the next, I will share the link as well in the next weeks. If they do not have a policy of sharing the questions, then we'll not be looking at them. Okay. I hope that clears your queries. Right? Thank you. All right. So moving on to the next question. So this was again something that was raised in the discussion forum query. What term describes the area which can potentially be affected by the development of a project? So based on methods of environmental and social impact assessment, landscape and visual, Rebecca Knight and Ricky Teruen, 2018, the reference book that we're using, right? So the area which can be potentially affected by the development of a project is zone of theoretical visibility. This has been clearly stated, but somebody has raised an objection to it, so saying it should be zone of landscape development. This is a technical term, and this is what has been mentioned in the book as well. So this is the answer, sir. The answer is correct, right? There is no issue with the answer key, right? I hope that clears the issue in the discussion forum. Is there any query regarding this? I hope not. It's given here, right? All right. Moving on to the next question. Match the scale of change of landscape given in group A with the definition in group B. So we have large, medium, small, and imperceptible to no change. So I'm going to go ahead and give the answer, right? Because we don't have much time. So possible definition of scale of landscape change. So one is, according to this slide, a minor change in landscape elements will be small, right? No perceptible change will be no change. Discernible change will be medium, and obvious change will be large, right? So the answer is C. Yeah, P4, Q3, R1, and S2. Yes, ma'am, you are right. You want the answer in the chat box is right. Moving on to the next question. State true or false. Allowing appropriate mitigation and investment is one of the purposes of historical and physical assessment. The answer is true, and you are right, ma'am. So this is stated as one of the purposes. Both of you are right. Yes, it's stated as one of the purposes of historical and physical assessment. The answer is true. Moving on to the next question. The image below is an example of a historical or cultural landscape from which country? Is this from Peru, Italy, Spain, or Greece? So we have a couple of answers in the chat box, and both of you are right. This is Pamanova city in Italy. Right? So that's from Italy. Question number 8. Match the field survey techniques given in A with their purposes in group B. So these are another set of, so we already saw test pitting. We have resistivity survey, magnetometer survey, and augering. Right? So hand excavation by creating small pits of plant sizes was test pitting, like we saw previously in the session. Most frequently used in the river valley where deposition has covered the land surface is augering. We'll see a bit about this, right? Measured ground resistance to the progress of an electrical current. Changes in resistance indicate the nature and location of buried features. So this will be the resistivity survey. So the electrical current resistance is what we'll be measuring. Measures the magnetic properties of the soil and is used to identify locations of past human activity. This is something like period of burning or hunting. So that will be useful. Right, so P3, Q4, R2 and S1. So the answer is B. Both of you are correct. These are the slides pertaining to the answers, right? So let's take a very brief look at what these surveys are. The first one is resistivity survey. So we usually have some equipment like this, and one or a set of people walk around the field and trying to detect. These have electrical currents going through. So this will be the sort of image that you'll get. So this is after excavation, right? This is post excavation. So if you do the electrical resistivity survey, before excavation, this is how the image will be. You can see how these red spots sort of indicate the presence of these, right? But somehow some of them were also missed, right? So we can see the excavated parts on the resistivity. This was at 37 centimeters depth. So you can do this resistivity survey at different depths. So you can calibrate and then figure it out, right? So this is a magnetometer survey. So again, I know the equipment sort of, it's like similar equipment, but this works on a different principle, right? So this one is a cesium magnetometer survey and interpretation. It's from a research paper. So you can see how the image turned out to be, right? So this is how you sort of figure out the presence of certain elements. That's how the image will be. There'll be experts interpreting these images coming out of such surveys, right? And that's how you determine whether to excavate carefully or to go ahead and do machine trenching and then start excavating. What is the depth of presence? All these can be determined through such surveys. There are other methods as well. Okay. So this is an auger survey. So auger surveys are usually done on riverbeds, like it was mentioned previously as well. But that's because it's all going to be soil, right? These surveys don't work in rocks. What happens is they'll sort of do this. So this augering means drilling. An auger is a drill. So they sort of drill this shaft. So this is the shaft. The shaft that you're seeing is this one, right? So they'll keep drilling this shaft inside and they'll take a sample of the, cross section that's coming up. So once you pull it out, you sort of scrape them out and then determine the soil profile. So this is laid on the after drilling and taking it out. This is a cross section that comes out. Right, so this is an auger survey. They usually done in riverbanks because it usually tends to be a lot of soil and silt deposit rather than rocky deposits. Otherwise, if an area has soft soil or soil that is permissible of such action, such drilling action, you can do this there also. So that's an auger survey. I hope that's clear. Right. Moving on to the next question. What is the correct order of steps involved in human risk assessment by planning and scoping? We already saw this. These four components are correct, but hazard identification is first, dose response assessment is second. So this is one, this is two. Exposure assessment is third, and risk characterization is fourth. Right? So you can see it here also from the slide. So the answer is wrong. The one that was given in the key is wrong. So none of these answers fits, which means this will be rectified in your assignment. Don't worry about it. So the answer is not given here. It's technically none of the above, right? Yes, the answer should be 1324. Okay. Whoever has raised the query in the discussion forum and here, you are right. All right. So question number 10. State true or false. One of the benefits of composing a chapter on health impact assessment within the EIA report is that it also becomes part of the regulatory decision making process. It's a true or false. Okay, I see a couple of answers coming, and both of you are right. All of you are right. So the answer is true. So it is usually, ma'am speaks about it when she's showing the slide. So when you present it as one chapter, it's it sort of makes the entire process easy, right? It becomes a part of the regulatory decision making process usually. So the answer is true. All right, moving on to the next question. So this is another query that was brought up in the discussion forum. Again, all of you are right. The answer that has been given in the key is wrong. It's a different answer. So match the project activity with potential positive community health outcomes. We have group A with building or upgrading roads. P is building upgrading roads. Q is occupational health safety, and R is jobs and income. So we have multiple physical and mental well-being outcomes. That will be jobs and income. Reduced rates of infectious diseases is I think occupational health safety. No, I think it's the other one, right? Yeah, okay. Occupational health and safety. Building and upgraded roads will be right. Reduce fatalities and injuries because reduced accidents, right? So the answer given here is wrong. The answer is in fact C. All of you are right. So the answer should be P3, Q2, and R1. Sorry about the issue with the key, right? So this will also be rectified. I hope that clears the doubts, whoever has raised it here as well. Okay. Moving on to the next question, which is again another query in the discussion forum. State true or false. Social impact assessment is the estimation and appraisal of the conditions of a society organized and changed as a consequence of a project. Is it true or false? Okay, all of you are correct. The answer is true. And so I think this person had an issue with this question because it says large scale application of high technology here, right? Extending this definition, it's for the project in question. So the answer is correct, right? Just because a word is slightly modified, that doesn't make the statement false, right? So the answer is true. Moving on to the next question. This one is a slight repeat of what we saw already earlier. State true or false. Social cohesion refers to people's sense of belonging to a community, their satisfaction with life in the community, and whether or not the community is considered as a social asset. Any responses? Okay, the answer is we have one answer, and you are right. This is the description of social cohesion. The answer is true. Okay. So, again, question number 14. This we'll see a bit in detail. Which among the following is a dimension of the global multi poverty index? We have four options. We have governance, environment, culture, and education. Any responses? Okay, we have a few responses, and all of you are correct. So, education is part of the global multi poverty index. The answer is B. So let's take a closer look at what this global multidimensional poverty index. This was developed by a couple of people to sort of map, to sort of state that poverty is not just about the amount of money that you are not having, right? It's multidimensional. That's the premise that they went with. The thing is, multidimensional indexes became a thing. A couple of people came up with this concept of multidimensional index, and then the index for poverty, as in which are the contributing factors, was developed later, right? So based on that development, multidimensional indices, we developed this global multidimensional poverty index. So we have three aspects: health, education, and living standards. So these are the three dimensions of poverty, and we have these equal weightage within each dimension. So within health, you have two aspects. You have nutrition and child mortality. Within education, you have years of schooling and school attendance. And then living standards, we have these six aspects, all of which will have equal, right? So this is one third, one sixth of one third. I hope the calculation is understood. So this is one third, this is one third, and this is one third, right? So for the overall, it is one sixth. So within this, it is half, right? So this one third is divided as equally between nutrition and child mortality. Similarly, living standards, you have six of them: cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets. Right? So these are the, like, what does it mean? Like, what do you mean nutrition? What do you mean child mortality? So, say under health, you have this indicator called nutrition. Uh, a particular person is determined as deprived if any person or a particular family, a household, is determined as deprived if any person under 70 years of age whom there is nutritional uh, for whom there is nutritional information is undernourished. So we need to have the nutritional information. That's part of the issue too. But they are undernourished. So somebody below 70 years of age is undernourished. But what does undernourished means? They go ahead and give that definition as well. Children under 5 years, that is 16 months and younger, are considered undernourished. If their Z score of either height for age or weight for age is below -2 standard deviations from the median of the reference population. So this is again something that you'll have to determine. So this is the procedure. For 5 to 9 years, what is it? Based on BMI cutoff. 20 to 70 years, what is it? Again, BMI below 18.5, right? So they are considered undernourished. And they have also mentioned how this is pertaining to Sustainable Development Goals too. So what is SDG 2? That will be zero hunger, right? Similarly, you have all these aspects. So child mortality will be is a family is considered deprived under this indicator if a child under 18 has died in the household in the 5-year period preceding the survey. Again, so they've mentioned what does this mean, right? Here, child mortality, what does it mean? So for each of them, they've actually gone ahead and defined. There is a manual that is issued under the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index. There is a methodological handbook that is issued, and this handbook sort of details how do you go ahead and calculate this, right? Mind you, this is all for the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, right? So as of 2018, 1.3 billion people live in multidimensional poverty, of which 50% are children, 32% are under 10 years old, right? So these are some infographics regarding, you know, people who are multidimensionally poor. Multidimensional poverty means it's not just about lack of income or lack of money, it's about all these things. You might end up having the money, but you might end up falling short. So who is considered multidimensionally poor? If you fall below one third of this indicator, right? You have to be at least 0.33. India, in absolute numbers, India has the highest number of multidimensionally poor people, right? And two-thirds of all multidimensionally poor people live in middle income countries, right? So, in 46% of those who are multidimensionally poor live in severe poverty, right? So, as in they are deprived of at least half of the weighted indicators. So, they have the value above zero point 0.5, right? So, these are some pointers about this. So, as of 2018, so two countries might actually have the same MPI value. The overall value might be same. If you look at this, we will calculate the MPI value, right? Because using all of these, you'll get a particular value below 1. But two countries can have the same value and the composition of poverty might vary, right? So these are the different aspects of poverty, right? So you have assets, housing, electricity, drinking water, sanitation, cooking fuel, school attendance, year of school. So these are education, this is health, and this is standard of living. Right? So where is global poverty rampant? Uh, as a proportion of the total share of population, Niger has 74.8% population that is multidimensionally poor. South Sudan has 74.3. So these are the top 10 countries: Chad, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Madagascar, Mali, Central African Republic, Mozambique, and Burundi. So within South Asia, if you actually look at the proportion of people, right, absolute numbers, India is leading, yes, but both in Afghanistan and Pakistan, 25% of the people are poor. So that's a lot. And 17 of the 19 poorest region, subnational regions. So they also have this subnational region aspect, which is sort of not exactly not necessarily a state. It could be a state also, but it could be a region. It's defined by them. So 17 of the 19 poorest subnational regions were in Afghanistan, right? So nutrition deprivations alone contribute more than one quarter. Right? So in case of India, the global multidimensional poverty index. So we have two aspects that are calculated when we are calculating MPA. So you can see this H value. H is the incidence of poverty, as in the number of households, right? And then rather the percentage share of households. Into A is the intensity of poverty. So they could be falling short in several things. They could be falling short just below, poverty line. So these are the statistics for India, national urban and rural statistics. Right? So India has moved 271 million people out of multidimensional poverty within a span of 10 years by 2018. So from 55% to 28% has happened, but we still have the largest number of people living in poverty, right? So this is the absolute change in MPA. As in, this is not the total number. How much have they changed, right? So fastest change has happened in areas like Jharkhand, Bihar, and all. But that doesn't mean they're out of it either. There has been a significant change, but they might still have a substantial amount of population that's multidimensionally poor, right? But if you remember or if you have heard about it, right now we spoke about multidimensional poverty index, but there is also this human development index, right? They have similar dimensions. For example, MPI has health, education, and standard of living, and human development index has long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living. But the composite indicators and how they are actually measured, that will vary, or their weightage will vary, right? So these components, the broad dimensions are the same, but these components. So for example, in health, we have nutrition and child mortality, but HDA is calculated using life expectancy of birth. So you end up building different indices. For example, you do GNI index, education index, life expectancy index, and from that you calculate the indicator score, and then you calculate HDA. These are sort of indicative of. So this is talking about deprivation. This is talking about development. They're post in opposite direction. So if you have a low value in MPI, it might be indicative of higher development, right? Better developed society. High value of HDA implies better developed society, right? So apart from the global multidimensional poverty index, India has a separate, different national multidimensional poverty index. This is from a report that has been released by NITI Aayog from 2021. This image. So you can see how the broad dimensions are the same. They've tried to match it with the international standards. So we have health, education, standard of living, yes, but we have 12 indicators, not 10. So we have one additional for health. So nutrition is fine, but you have child and adolescent mortality, and so you can see the weightage also varies, right? So this is 50% of health, this is 25% of health, and this is 25% of health. Antenatal care, and then these are the corresponding definitions. Education, the number of years of schooling. So here you can see the definitions also slightly vary, right? Then here, under standard of living, you have fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing assets, and bank accounts. So when no household member has a bank account or a post office account, which can also have a savings bank component to it, that is also considered in standard of living. So this is India's version. It's not the international version, right? So this is the share of indicators in India's version. If you look at the report, you can actually see the individual states reports as well as the national report. I think the national report is on a bit too low. Yeah, you can. mm, So these are the individual indicator values for each state. This is the overall India's state and union territories color coded. This is for each district, right? So all these are present in the PDF. You can take a look at it. All right. I hope that gives you a background of this very important index, right? Moving on to the next question. State true or false. This is again something that we already saw. Physical displacement refers to the loss of housing resulting from the project-related acquisition of land and or restrictions on land use that require the affected persons to move to another location. Yes, true or false? Both of you are right. This is true, right? We saw both physical and economic displacement. The answer is true. All right, that's all for today's session. I hope I didn't rush too quickly towards 10. I just wanted to cover a bit.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. You don't have to call me ma'am. So I, I hope that's helpful. I tried to give a bit of extra information so that you can, it's whatever is extra in these sessions are not part of the examination. That will be way too much. It's sort of to give you an idea and clarification as to where the answers are coming from, and at the same time give you a bit of extra information. You're spending 2 hours here, might as well learn something new as well. But those additional things will not be part of your examination. Regarding queries about the examination, I will contact the main team. Uh, yeah, it so happens that the coding is very bad. Many of the true or false answers is true, and most of the 1, 2, 3, or 4 answers are all of the above. I know, but I think they've tried to. No, we cannot guarantee it, right? Like, what if it is false? Right? We'll never know. But the thing is, during these assignments, they've tried to give you maximum information, right? I think that's the reason why most of these answers are true, or it's one thing to have these live interaction sessions, but maybe somebody is learning something and we don't want to give just the negative answer. That's the reason why they've maximized the answers, but that's not necessarily the case in the examination. You never know. Right? So, yeah, the queries regarding the format of the questions that be there in the examination, I will put across a message to them. Hopefully, there will be some sort of clarification. I will post it as soon as I receive the information, but even otherwise I will like, please be prepared nonetheless. Hopefully by next week this should be clear, but according to the mail you'll have all sorts of questions, right? So I don't know, I really don't know. I try to uh, paper presentation as in, I don't understand your question. You can unmute and ask as well. I don't know. Oh, I'm not really sure about this aspect. I have no idea. So I'm also new to the format. The problem is that, so we sort of are separate from the main bunch of people who are handling the thing. But I will ask them. I'll get a clarification on this. So if you don't mind, can you explain what you mean by paper presentation? You can unmute and speak as well. It's just a couple of us.
Ma'am, today they have sent the email that saying that we have to attend in the mail, it will be present in the computer. But another option is there, you have to present, write in the paper answer sheet and upload in the computer. And two options are there. I don't understand. Today's mail is there.
No, no. So if the thing is, there are two formats for the examination. Is my screen visible? I'll share the. Yeah. So can you see my screen? Yeah. So here, this is the mail that you got, right? Exam format April 2023. Correct? Yeah. You're talking about this computer-based exam and pen and paper exam, right? So our subject, if you click this type of exam, will be available in the list here. So you click this list. Our subject is environmental impact assessment, right? In this, if you see, it is only online. Sorry, it's only online computer based. You do not have the pen and paper option. This is not, we'll only have this type, computer based exam. Okay, is that clear? Yeah, all right. So we do not have the pen and paper. That I'm very sure about, because given here, only very few subjects you can see in this list. Right? Very few subjects of pen and paper. All others are online exams. All right, but here they've said that you may have multiple choice, fill in the blanks, essay types, etc. This I will try to get a clarification on. I'm not sure either. So several people have asked this question. All right, then if all the queries have been addressed, then we can close the session for the day, right? If there are any more queries, you can always post in the discussion forum. If you want me to address it specifically, you can go ahead and mention my name or mention that this is pertaining to the live interaction session. Then I can directly address it, right? Uh, it's slightly ambiguous. I'm not sure if we can address all the responses in the discussion forum directly. That's one of the reasons why I'm personally not addressing it. But once I've gotten the clearance, or if I think I can go ahead and respond, I will go ahead and respond. But if you mention live session or interaction session or discussion session, then it will be upon us to respond. So we will definitely respond. Right? If you need any other changes, any other explanations, we can have. Please let me know in the discussion forum. I'll try to address them. Okay. That's all for today then. Thank you so much for joining today. I'll see you soon next week.